Hello everyone and welcome to Sew with Jessica. For today's video we are making this lovely maxi skirt, the tiered flay maxi skirt. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that well. I used a jeans fabric or a denim fabric to make mine. This was the inspiration behind me using a denim fabric to make this skirt. This picture right here shows the patterns for this maxi skirt online. I didn't buy the patterns, I made mine everything from scratch, and this is a tutorial on how you can also make yours from scratch. So if you're also interested in getting the patterns, you might as well check her. I got the picture from Pinterest, so I think this type of skirt can be made with any type of fabric at all, so long as it's not a stretchy fabric. Any other fabric would come out so fine. I think it even comes out way better in lightweight fabrics than in thicker fabrics. But like I said, this was the idea I was going for. I used 2 yards to make this. The length of this jeans fabric right here on the screen, right, is longer than the regular length, like 80 something, close to 90, but not up to 90. We are going to move on to the measurements you're going to need to make this lovely skirt right here on the screen. So you're just going to need 2 measurements. We are going to look at the length and we are going to look at the width. Now to get the length, we are going to determine how many tiered flay we want. Do you want to make 3 or you want to make 4? I made 3, so I'm going to take the full length of my skirt, and the full length of my skirt is 43 inches. That's the whole length I want to use for my skirt, which is 43 inches. So what I did was I divided 43 by 3 because 3 is the number of tiered flay I want to get, and that gave me these measurements right here on the screen. For my first tiered flay, that's the measurement I'm going to use for the length. For the second one, that's the measurement I will use, and for the third one, that's the measurement I will use. But I do not want the whole tiered flay to have like equal length. Like, I don't want them to have like equal length. I want the first tiered flay to be shorter than all of them. So what I did was I subtracted 2 inches from the first tiered flay, and then I added it to the last one. So it made everything fall in 3 different steps. The first one became shorter than the second, and the second became shorter than the last one. That was the idea I had. The next thing we are going to move over to is the width. How are we going to get the width for these 3 tiered flays that we have right here? So for the first flay, I'm going to use my hip measurement. My hip is 42. So 42 times 1.5 gives me 63. That includes both the front and the back piece. It's going to be 63 inches wide. And then in order for this to flow perfectly, your second flay, the next one following the first one, or the following flay, has to be bigger than the initial first one. It has to like be bigger than it. Yes, so you're going to multiply 63 by 1.5, which is going to give us the measurements we are going to use to get the second tiered flay. And then in order to get the third one, I'm going to multiply the total of the second flay by 1.5 inches, and that was how I was able to get an accurate measurement. So if I had used a lightweight fabric for this, you would see that it would still come out really nice, but it wouldn't be as full as this. Like I said, this fabric is very thick. I think that's basically everything I did for the measurements. The sewing process is very easy. So long as you get the measurements right, everything will fall in place. So let's just get into the sewing process. I folded my fabric into 2 in order to get the first tiered flay, and I'm going to start with the length. So now that the fabric is folded into 2, I'm going to start marking 12.3 inches downwards. But before then, I'm going to roll out a straight line at the top part, and that's just going to indicate my starting line, and also it's going to, help me leave some space for sewing allowance at the top part there. So I placed 2 inches outside of this folded fabric. I just placed 2 inches on that chalked line there, and that 2 inches is going to be my waistband. So I'm just going to start marking my 12.3 inches now, and that's the length that I will need for the first tiered flay. Now I'm going to mark the width, and I need 63 inches width, but I'm going to be dividing 63 by 2 to get the width because the fabric is already on fold. So once I mark that measurement right there, I'm going to now mark my sewing allowance, which I'm going to use 1 inch because I'm going to later divide everything for front and back. But let's just go ahead and just add our sewing allowance, which I'm using 1 inch. Then I'll go ahead and I'll cut everything out. And that's just the whole cutting process for the first tiered flay. And we'll move over to the second one. So after I cut out the first one, I indicated it as tier 1, that's TI and then 1. So I'll just keep that aside. So for the next flay, I'm going to open up the fabric before I mark down the measurements that I'll be using. So I'm going to first of all mark downwards the length, and for the length we have 14.3 inches there. So I'll just mark 14.3 inches all through as seen, and once I've gotten that, I will connect the 14.3 inches together in order to have like a straight line. So now that I have marked the length, I will proceed to mark the width. So for the second tiered flay, the width we are using is 94.5 inches. So I'm going to place my tape from one of the ends and I'll try to get the 94.5 inches. But then after I marked it all through, I was only able to get 70 inches from this side of the fabric that I have here. That's 60 inches, and the remaining part there is 10 inches. So that gave me a total of 70 inches, and I'm just going to keep that aside. I'll just go ahead and complete the remaining length at the lower part there. So I'll just continue marking the 14.5 inches as the length, just to be able to get the complete 94.5 inches that I need. So after I marked it, I went ahead to add up my sewing allowance, but I added 2 inches for the sewing allowance instead, and that's because I will be joining this piece to this other top part, so that I'll be able to like get like a complete length, a complete width before any other thing can go on to. So I'm going to join these two pieces together here, so that way I have my complete width of 94.5 inches. So over to my sewing machine, I joined the two of them together just as seen. I'm just using half an inch to sew it up together, and after sewing it together, I'll trim off one of the allowance as seen. Now I'm going to open this up on the sewing machine, and I'm going to fold down the second sewing allowance, and I'm just sew very close to the edge right there, and you will see how nice and clean this seam looks. So this is basically how I'm going to join any parts that is supposed to be joined. This is how I'm going to just go over it and sew it up. So now I have a whole piece that is 94.5 inches long, and that's going to be for my second flay. I'll keep that aside, and then we'll move over to cutting out the third flay. So for my third flay, this is the remaining piece of fabric I have. For the length will be 16.3 inches and the width will be 141.75 inches. So I will start marking down the length, which is 16.3 inches. Once I have gotten the length, I will make a straight line across it just as seen, and that way I have already determined the length. Now I'm going to mark the width of that area there, and what I have there is 70 inches, which is like almost half of the measurements that I need. So I just wrote 70 there. It means I will still have to mark out another piece of fabric, but because my fabric was not enough, I had to use exactly 140 inches instead of 141. So I just cut out another 70 inches at the lower part, and that was just everything I used. So the remaining piece of fabric left, I used it to make my pockets and also the waistband. So this is the width of the second piece of fabric. I'm not going to join this together. I'll just keep it aside since it's on equally cut. So this is the only piece of fabric left that I'll use for the waistband and the pockets. I'll keep that aside. Then I'll bring my first piece, which is the tier 1, and I'm going to divide it into two. I'm going to cut it up so that it can be in two separate pieces. And the reason why I'm cutting it so it can be into separate pieces because I want to sew the front piece separate from the back piece. So I'll just keep that other one aside. I'll just take that one to be my back piece. Now I'll move over to the second flay, and I'm going to fold it into two equal parts, and I'm also going to divide it into two. One of them is going to serve as the back piece and the other is going to serve as the front piece. So I'll keep the other one aside, and then I'll bring back my third flay. Remember, we already have it cut in two equal pieces, so I'll just keep one and then keep the other one aside, and this is going to be all I'll be needing. So like I mentioned earlier, the sewing process is like the easiest part. So I'm going to start off with the last piece, which is the third flay. I'm going to gather it up and I'm going to join it to the second flay. So for my gathers, what I did was to make a very straight, regular straight loose stitch so that I can be able to pull it off later. I also went back to double the stitch just in case as I'm pulling it and one of them decides to cut, I know the second one can still sustain me to make my gathers. So after I was done, what I did basically was to pull the thread, and as I was pulling the thread, it was gathering up the fabric. Trust me, this took me a lot of time, but I really do not mind. I was the one that decided to use a denim fabric, but if you're using a lightweight fabric, this would not even take you a lot of time as it took me making this with a jeans fabric. So this is what the whole gathering process looks like. You just pull the thread and everything will continue to gather up. I'm just taking my time to show you guys because this is the same step I'm going to repeat for basically all of the flares, and this is it. So after pulling the gathers, I just made sure it was enough, like it was the same length, it was like gathered to the same length of the second flare. So this is what it looks like. It's also actually the same length with the second flare now, and I'm going to sew it up with the second flare. After sewing it up together, this is what it looks like. I'm going to flip it over to the right face so we have a clearer view. And now I'm going to make a gather stitch again on the top part of the second piece so that I can gather it up to have like the same width as the first flare, and then I'll join it up together, which is basically like what we did just now. So this is what it looks like. I was done at this point. This is what my tiered flares look like. I also went ahead to do the same thing with the other pieces that I kept aside, and now I'm going to proceed to cutting out my pockets and also sewing the pockets. So this is how I usually cut out my pockets. I'll just place my hand and then I'll chalk out the width of the pocket, both the width and the length, using my hand as a guide because I want to believe that my pocket should be enough to accommodate my hand. So I usually cut out my pocket like this, and it's pretty much very easy. So once I've cut this pocket out, I'm still going to cut out two other pieces of this pocket, two for one side and two for the other side. So I marked down from the lower part upwards, I marked 1/2 inch, and from the top part downwards, I marked 1/2 inch. And then I made sure that this 1/2 inch I mark is at least 1/2 inch wide as well. And then I'll just connect a straight line to meet the other one as seen. So that's going to be the area that I'm going to be sewing. Now where my pocket will be placed, I'll make sure it is placed at least 1 inch below from the top part of the skirt. I'll mark 1 inch down. That is where the pocket is going to be placed from. This type of pocket is called the hidden side pocket. It's not like the slash side pockets that I've done several tutorials on. This is like a hidden one. You can barely tell if there's a side pocket there, but there's a pocket there. So now I'll notch along that area there, along the top part, and I'm going to notch along the lower part. This is going to enable me flip this over properly. It's going to allow everything relax as it should be. So this is what it looks like now that it is folded. I'm going to open this up again, and I'm going to try to stop stitch so that the sewing allowance underneath it can, relax properly on one face. So this is totally optional, but I just made sure that all the sewing allowance was facing the pocket area, and then I top stitch downwards. Now we are going to bring the second part of the pocket, and we are going to place it on this pocket that is already sewn to the skirt. We are going to make sure the pockets are equally placed, and then we are going to start sewing all around the 1/2 inch that we left at the top and the lower part. We're just going to sew all through, like join the pockets together as seen, but just make sure they're equally placed before you go ahead and sew all around. So once you finish and you flip everything over, the other side of the pocket, the allowance of the other side of the pocket left is going to complete that space that we have there, and then we can sew the other piece of the skirt on it. I hope my explanation makes sense. I don't know if you can see this closely, but I also sewed the pocket to the other side of the skirt. So right now all I need to do is to attach the back piece, like the other side of the skirt, to this. I have to sew all of them together. And this is a closer view of how I join the skirt pieces together, specifically the pocket area, so you can see how I joined it together. So you're basically joining this other side of the skirt to the other pocket. I don't know if it makes sense, but just follow what you see in the video and you will get it right. I'll open it up so we have a closer view of what the pocket area looks like. So this is basically how I sewed up the side seams along the pocket area. I'll just go ahead and I'll continue joining up the remaining side seams together. Just make sure that each of the tiered flay aligns with the back piece. I don't know, the lines should be equal. No one should be higher than the other one. If you're having that mistake, make sure to loosen it up and fix it. If I'm going to be very honest with you guys, at this point, I was starting to regret why I used a denim fabric to make this skirt. I could have just gone for a more lightweight fabric, probably a cotton fabric or even a floral crepe fabric, something lighter, even chiffon, because right at this point, this fabric was very heavy. Yeah, I was basically struggling to control it on my sewing machine. And if you look at my sewing machine very well, you will see that the extended part, like that extended part where your fabric is supposed to sit on, has already broken off. So I'm just basically struggling right here to sew this together. But if I'm honest, I do love the result. I love how everything came out. This is just basically everything. You're going to sew, but the whole mat around making this tiered flay is very easy, but it just requires you sewing a lot. Also, I noticed the jeans was fading off because my hands was having like shade of blue. I don't know why, but I think it's common with jeans fabric or denim fabrics. This is basically everything, guys. I'll move over to making the waistband. So I cut out the waistband to the same width of the first flay, and then I sewed it up together. After joining it up, I'm going to fold down the waistband and it should look like this. So at this point, you can decide if you want to fix your elastic in the waistband first before attaching it to the skirt, or you want to just go ahead with this method that I'm doing. So what I'm going to do basically is to just attach the folded waistband to the skirt piece. Okay, make sure that it's placed right face facing each other, exactly like this, and you sew up the waistband to the skirt as seen. So after sewing it up together, this is what it looks like. I left some space there, and that's the area where I'm going to pass my elastic into the waistband. So I placed the elastic around my waist to be sure that this is the amount of elastic that I needed. Make sure to put the elastic when placing it along your waist, and then also make sure to use a thick elastic, like a very strong elastic, because if you're using a denim fabric, trust me, the weight of the jeans is going to make the elastic ineffective. So just make sure you're using a very strong elastic. So now at this point, I started to pass in the elastic from that opening, that space I left along the waistband area. So I passed in the elastic as seen. After passing in the elastic, I sewed up the elastic at that point, and then I fixed it back into the waistband, and then I closed up that space that was left in the waistband. This brought me to the end of this video. This was where I stopped, but if you want to top stitch along the waistband area so that the elastic does not turn inside, you can go ahead and do that, but I did not. And this brings us to the end of this tutorial. I took this to those that weave, and they weaved the inside of the skirt for me. So this is basically everything. If you learned something new, make sure to give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share, because that will help you to recommend this channel to other people. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.